get started. I'm Yasmin Gagne. I'm a staff editor at Fast Company and the co-host of our Most Innovative Companies podcast. Come check us out. We're actually going to record this for the podcast. And I don't love speaking for people, so I'm going to ask Tarana to introduce herself.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Tarana Burke, founder of the Me Too movement and Chief Vision Officer at Me Too International.
Chief Vision Officer is a...
Oh, thank you.
We like that. So, Tarana, we're going out the deep end here.
Oh.
Difficult question to start. So just last week, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that he would run for mayor. We have a president and members of cabinet.
Don't cheer for that.
We have a president and members of cabinet, accused or convicted of sexual assault. How are you feeling about all this?
A little angry. So, I've been asked about this a lot, obviously, in the last week or so. The thing is, I just want us to do better and dream better and think bigger. The fact of the matter is, there's so many people who say that they care about this issue, right? And the issue of sexual and gender-based violence is really at pandemic levels in this country. Forget about around the world. Right here in the United States, it is at incredible levels, unspeakable levels. And so there are so many people, and I'm not talking about the boogeyman bad guys. I'm talking about regular, everyday people who are like, I want this to end. What can we do about it? Blah, blah, blah. What you can do is, when things like this happen, right, we say that out of one side of our mouth, and in the other side of our mouth, you have somebody like Cuomo, a governor who stepped down from his position, a governor who has both a Department of Justice investigation and an investigation by his own attorney general into the allegations against him as things that actually happened, which is why he stepped down. And here we are, because New York has a terrible mayor currently. I'm a New Yorker, so I can say this. Let me just start by saying that.
I'm a New Yorker, I can agree with you.
Right, New York has a terrible mayor. It doesn't mean we have to take a terrible governor and make him our mayor, right? So if we actually want these things to stop, if we want to make an impact on the issue of sexual and gender-based violence, we have to figure out where the line is and hold the line. We keep moving it and pushing it. Well, maybe we can take him. He's kind of a good, I know that happened, but that but right there, when you say that, that is exactly where the issue dies.
I was going to follow up and ask, what do you make of these men being able to make a comeback like this?
So first, let me just say, when I speak publicly, I get this is what most people want to hear, but I get asked about the bad actors all the time, right? I don't actually have an issue when people harm other people. There should be a pathway for both the person who caused harm and the harm doer to come back to whatever. I believe that. Now, I think there are some people, sexual violence happens on the spectrum, accountability should happen on the spectrum, right? So this is not just about throwing people away, but what we haven't witnessed, what most of us haven't witnessed is the thing that happens after the harm, right? Where is the accountability? Where is the person that comes back and says, I understand that this person was harmed and this is what I did to understand that better. This is how I've changed. We don't see that. What we see is people who disappear for a while and then they come back. Yeah. So I don't think the majority of survivors, at least, are saying you need to be banished into Never Never Land and we never see you again. I probably shouldn't say Never Never Land, but whatever. But you shouldn't be. I don't think that's what we're saying. But what we're saying is, if you want to be amongst civil society, we need to understand that you won't cause harm again. That you understand that you caused harm in the first place. And the biggest problem with a lot of these men who have these accusations and have these things that have actually been proven is that we don't see any of that, right? And then they go away. The survivors often demonized, and then they just reappear. And that's the problem I have.
This is not the right way to put it, but I think you'll understand the height of the Me Too movement in 2017. I'm talking about when you were named as, Times Person of the Year alongside others. Do you think we've seen a true cultural shift given, all this recent news?
Yes. So here's the thing. Sexual violence has a history that goes all the way back to the Bible. There's no way that a hashtag was going to erase that, right? It was never going to happen. So I think the leaps and bounds that we've seen in the last 7 years, without that viral moment, would have probably taken 20 years. That said, we still have a ways to go. So I think because people are like, oh, well, in 2017 and 2018, blah, blah, when this happened, it was on the front page of the newspaper and there was days and days of information. Those things never last. Those moments never last. But what has lasted is the policies that have been changed, the laws that have been changed, but also the way people think and talk about it. We have given the world language and a way to talk about sexual violence. We've given survivors community and a place to put that burden of sexual violence, right? So there has been a cultural shift. It hasn't shifted enough. And every time you have, if you're talking about powerful, not just men, just power structures that have existed for so long. Patriarchy is a structure that has existed for so long. So we've made a dent in that. Of course the pendulum is going to try to swing back the other way, right? We would be foolish not to expect that. The difference is when it swings back this time, we're coming with a different analysis. I'm 51 years old. You find a 21-year-old, right? 21-year-olds grew up with the Me Too movement. So they're going into college now with a particular analysis around that. They have less shame about talking about things that have happened to them, and they're really clear about what they will not allow to happen to them. Those are the kind of shifts that have happened in the last 7 years that are really important and often get lost in between the headlines of who's on the cover and who's not and who did this and who. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So on the Me Too Fund site, there are some annual reports. What kind of trends have you seen over time, in those reports and in your work?
And reports on what? Say it again. On funding?
Both on funding and then also, you mentioned policies that have changed, for instance.
Yeah, well, let me just say this. Funding for sexual and gender-based violence is at an all-time low. We've actually seen in the last probably 5 years, several of the foundations, the public foundations that do support this work have either closed or have closed their portfolios that support this work. That predates this administration. It's something that has been happening globally. It is happening right here in the United States. So it is very difficult to fund the work to end sexual and gender-based violence. And I want to say on that point, we talk about this as something that's not solvable, but this is a solvable issue. And if you think about all these other issues that exist in the world, oftentimes people talk about them as solvable. When at the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis, people were always, scrambling, trying to figure out how to deal with it. And then we're going to get to zero. Remember that campaign? Get to zero. Because what that did psychologically is tell you that we can solve this with the right amount of resources, human, financial resources. We can solve this. I often use the example of Bloomberg. Follow me for a second. But Mike Bloomberg decided about 25 years ago that he wanted to make America smoke-free, tobacco-free. And what he did was he got some of his billionaire buddies, and they invested more than $20 billion with a B dollars over the last 25 years in making us smoke-free. Well, what do we know is different culturally from 25 years ago to now? You light a cigarette anywhere, people are like, oh my God, who's smoking, right? You can't smoke. You used to be able to smoke on airplanes, y'all. Like, you could smoke in a hospital. Yeah, right. We those of us of a certain generation grew up with a dad smoking with the windows closed in the station wagon, right? Like, you could smoke everywhere. And now, yes, people still smoke, but we had multiple interventions because of that investment. And those were medical interventions, right? We had research that came out talking about secondhand smoke will kill you. We had legal interventions where the tobacco industry was sued. We had research interventions and we had cultural interventions. All of those the lady, don't smoke because remember that lady with the thing with the, we had all of those, but we remember those things, right? We had a movement, we had movement interventions where they had a movement to get cigarette machines out of schools. Imagine if that was the kind of intervention we had around sexual and gender-based violence, where we were having a curriculum in schools that taught children year over year about consent, not just one time in the 12th grade in front of a computer, right? Imagine if we had research that showed us the effects, the medical effects that sexual trauma has on people, right? So my point is, we need more funding across the board because this is a solvable issue if we want to solve it. And the data already exists that shows that it's happening in other places.
So I want to talk a little bit about social media.
Oh.
You know, #MeToo was very powerful, but social media, I mean, I don't know, are you still on X?
What is that? Oh, Twitter?
I couldn't find your account yesterday.
I'm going to tell you what, somebody hacked my account. It's a true story. It's an old lady auntie story. Somebody hacked my account. I kept emailing them, and they didn't respond. I just let it go.
Oh, that's why I couldn't find you.
Yeah, it's on there somewhere. I don't know. So I'm not trying to sell you a MacBook for $10 on Twitter. Somebody hacked my account. I'm on Instagram.
But where I was going with that is, you know, social media has also kind of become a hotbed of abuse, of vitriol,
Yes.
of personal attacks against
Yes.
women and people of color.
Yes.
How do you think about that now? Do you think social media is still a useful tool?
Of course. I think tools, just because a tool becomes weaponized doesn't take away its usefulness, right? It's really about us and how we use it and the safety measures that we put in place. The panel that we did earlier was about, some of it was about tech-facilitated gender-based violence, which is I learned a phrase today I didn't even know. What was it? Something flashing. Cyber flashing? You know when you get them unsolicited pictures of the private parts?
The airdrops.
We call them something else. D-pics. There's an actual name for that. It's called cyber flashing, right? There's a new apps where they can undress you in a fully dressed picture, undressing apps. And then character AI. See, I got to get somebody to feed me here. Character AI is another thing, but there's ways in which violence is being perpetuated through social media and online, and it's the new frontier. The same way we need, the laws and the rules are always 10 steps behind, but we know. And it's going to take, for those of us who know, those of us who have children who are exposed to that, or other people in our lives who are exposed to it, or ourselves, we need to be vigilant about it, and we need to be talking about the issues around this so that we can speed up and have the laws catch up to it. But I think social media is still useful. It just depends on how we use it. And I'm going to say this. You got the right one because I talk a lot. I'm going to also say this. I really feel like we're going to start moving back towards in-person, in real life connection. Social media is just not doing it. You know, after being inside for COVID and whatever, we really need to move. I think that people are going to start moving back to in real life connections and using social media as a way to figure out how to connect to people in real life.
So I want to talk a little bit, you know, earlier we talked about politics, and I think there's been a real focus on politics and entertainment when it comes to Me Too coverage. Mm-hmm. Do you think that kind of coverage can sort of minimize or be detrimental to kind of your work in other fields?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges and probably the saddest part of the viral moment around Me Too is that it created so much attention around people who cause harm or people who have been accused of causing harm. And I tell people this all the time. You had millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people around the world who raised their hand to say, this happened to me too. Y'all wouldn't know me, you wouldn't know the hashtag, you wouldn't know any of that if it wasn't for the people, not the celebrities, right? Not the politicians, not the entertainers. And then we immediately took our eyes off the survivors. And so it is harmful when the news cycle is only talking about the Me Too movement when some other person has been accused, or to tell us that we're dead again, because, you know, we die once a year. We hotter than Jesus, honey. We get dead and resurrected like once a year. But it's that's the only time people want to talk about the Me Too movement is when they want to either criticize it, blame it for something, or like, where is it now when so and so's been accused? And the truth of the matter is, this is a movement that has empowered so many survivors, that has helped so many find community, that has been such a catalyst for healing and action, which is what our organization is about, right? And we created the organization to be a container for the movement because we knew we couldn't depend on mainstream media or politicians to do that.
Now, speaking of people declaring your movement dead or the movement dead, what is your response to people who claim that Me Too is a witch hunt?
Oh, God. Let me tell you something. I wish I was Glenda the Good Witch or somebody, because I'd have my own little list. I think that it minimizes, though, the effects that Me Too have had. It's not a witch hunt. Nobody has like a list of people. What I think that people fail to realize is just how pervasive sexual violence is. Not was, but is in this country. And when you think about how pervasive it is, and then you have a moment where there might be some catharsis, right? Just a moment where people are like, wait, I can say this out loud. I can pull this thing I've been holding in the pit of my stomach for 40 years. That's what it was. It was people who were releasing trauma, releasing agony, releasing this, and there were consequences to that. So it's not a witch hunt, right? What really saddens me is patriarchy messes everybody up, right? It's not just men. It's all of us. All of us were raised in patriarchy. All of us were socialized in it. And because of that, when you had these women, or mostly women, who got up to tell their stories, what most people heard was a man's life being ruined. But they couldn't hear a woman's life being saved, right? Because that patriarchy has us so, messed up. It has us so messed up to thinking...
You can say the F word here.
Oh, I was going to say fast company. It's the only F word I acknowledge. No, but patriarchy has us in such a chokehold that even when a woman is just trying to save her own life, we still think about the man whose life is being ruined. And that is fundamentally the problem. We have to fix that. We have to shift that so that there's enough space for us to get what we need. Those of us who are survivors, who are trying to release that and just find the resources, or the community, should be able to release that. Now, here's the other thing. I just had this whole conversation about Believe survivors, online, this other conversation I had the other day. We say Believe survivors because we want survivors to have the respect and dignity of investigation, right? If you believe me, you won't try to undermine me. You won't try to ask me questions like, why were you wearing this, or what were you doing, right? You're going to start from the premise that I'm telling the truth. And if you think somebody's telling the truth, then you're going to help them get the resources they need, the guidance they need. Sometimes that's investigation. And that helps everybody involved, right? If you're the person being accused, or you're the person who has the accusation, everybody is involved, should be treated with respect and humanity. It's not going to always be comfortable, though. There's a misconception that you deserve comfort, we have to create a life where you're never uncomfortable. That investigation might be uncomfortable, right? But at the end of the day, when a person is harmed, there should always be something to deal with the harm that was caused.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about, your progress or your work with the Me Too Fund. You mentioned...
when you say fund, you must mean our organization.
Organization.
Yeah, so it's me, yes. Because I'm like, we don't have a fund, baby. We ain't got no money. But I think we used to have a fund a long time ago.
Oh,
we gave all of that money away, and
yeah. All give it away.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes, the Me
I
Too Fund was...
apologize.
No, it's fine. We had a fund. Abigail Disney donated money to us
Yeah,
when we
that's
started.
right. Okay.
And that was even before we started the organization. We tried to raise $25 million.
Yeah.
That was our goal, because I was like, I've been in this work in the field, and I know where this money should go. We could not raise that money. We raised about $2.5 million. But what we did, though, I don't know how many organizations we funded. Help me. Our CEO is sitting here in the audience. Danielle is, by the way. Shout out to Danny, CEO of Me Too International, who gives me good information. But we funded numerous organizations. 25, there we go, 25. But these were 25 grassroots organizations who were on the ground doing work to end sexual violence. And so, yeah, so that money went about 5 years ago.
Well, when you think about, you mentioned technology, for example, and the sort of new frontiers or dangers there might be. How do you think about allocating your attention?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we split our attention a few ways. One, in terms of technology, is something that we call digital direct service. When Me Too went viral, again, so many survivors now had this language of Me Too, and of course, when they felt harmed or triggered or whatever, they were like, well, what can Me Too do for me? And so one of the things that we wanted to do really quickly was set up, well, two things. We set up a database. So we have probably one of the largest databases of resources on our website, on Me Too International's website. And those resources are deeply diversified. So when I was doing this work in communities with young black girls in the South, I could never find resources that were specific to them. So when we built this, our resource database, we wanted to make sure you could filter to find yourself. So you can be, I don't know, a disabled trans veteran and a survivor. You could be whatever, like you can put all of these things in. You can say, this happened to me in college, this happened to me as a child, or whatever, so that you can find what you need specifically. So that's one thing. The other thing we have is our pride and joy, Survivors Sanctuary. And it's an online healing platform. It's really beautiful, y'all. You should all just have access. It is free, of course. So Survivor Sanctuary is a place for survivors literally to find sanctuary. We have a variety of videos from as short as 5 minutes to as long as 30 minutes. And they take you through all kinds of different places. Most people don't understand the lived experience of survivors. And, there's a lot of resources for people who just had that experience and don't realize that some of us have had these experiences for 30 years and we need access to those kind of resources. So Survivor Sanctuary provides that. The other way we split our attention is, again, today on another panel, my panelist said something I thought was really great, that he always saw survivors as like a glass case, like a fragile glass case or the glass box. Yeah. And now he sees this differently because he does this work. We are always engaging survivors of sexual and gender-based violence from a place of pity, right? If you notice, even when we drag folks out to tell their stories, these politicians want us to testify, and they want to hear these dirty, deep down, dark stories of our trauma. But survivors are the most powerful people that you can encounter, because we've already come through the worst of the worst and landed on the other side. And so we engage survivors from a place of power. The other part of our work is about building power. I'm really excited about the idea of building a constituency. Imagine us voting along the lines of our survivorship. Imagine survivors, and there's millions of us, as a voting bloc. So we're focusing a lot of our energy in building survivor power. And that's not just politically, right? We are really interested in that. A lot of you might have seen our campaign, Survivors Vote, we just had this past year. We have a U.S. network called Survivors Agenda. We built the first ever political agenda by survivors, for survivors, from them. So I'm really interested in how we take that trauma, how we take those experiences and turn them into power for people. And then the third thing is our work is global. So we're called Me Too International because it's a global movement. And we really needed to find a vehicle to touch those people who were reaching out to us right after Me Too went viral and were like, how do I start Me Too Ethiopia? How do I start Me Too Australia? And we were like, wait, give us a minute. Let's think about this. Now we have a network that is, right now, it's growing, but it's in Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa. In some parts of Europe, we have an at-large part of it that is 134 countries, 134 organizations, across, 60 countries or 70 countries. So it is really beautiful because we come into that conversation not from a place of like U.S. imperialism, right? Like the U.S. has all the answers and we come to solve your little problems in your little brown countries. We come to it saying, listen, what's happening here is also happening in America, but we don't like to name it in America. We will put headlines out to say, think about the woman who was beheaded by her boyfriend in South Africa, whatever. Guess what? That happened in Oakland too, right? What happens in other places happens here. And so our global network is really about what can we do together that we can't do separately.
Speaking of the global network and also of the database you made, all these tools are amazing, these organizations are amazing, but how do you reach the most vulnerable population that you're trying to reach? What are the best sort of techniques you found?
Talking to them. I'm always fascinated. I know this is just a question you're asking, but it's fascinating when people are like, how do you reach the poor? Where do you find the blacks? Just open your mouth and talk to them. Like, I think that we have created tools. And I'm going to tell you something else that's really important. Our visual branding, our tools are very reflective of every population that we want to reach. So we have people with disabilities on our site. We have trans folks on our site. We have people of every race, religion on our site represented. So people need to see themselves to know that you're talking to them. And there's a misconception that Me Too was just about white women, whatever. Well, one, white women are survivors. Surprise. But also, white women come in a lot of varieties. So there are white women with disabilities. There are white women who are, so we try to speak to every possible configuration of, so people know that's how you reach them. People have to see themselves represented. You have to speak to people like they're human beings, right? Not over their head or just to them, and say, this is for you. We created this for you with open arms. We want everybody to come in. Now, our work, we operate from a black feminist ideology. Black feminism is going to save everybody, in case you didn't know that, because it starts with the least of these. That ideology, that thinking means that we start from the least of these to make sure everybody has what they need. That is really what's undergirding the work at Me Too. We want to make sure everybody has what they need, but the most marginalized is where we start.
My last question for you, and then I think we'll have time for one or two questions from the audience, maybe.
If y'all act right.
What are you looking forward to? Are there any initiatives coming up that we should be paying attention to?
State of the Union already passed, right? I'm just playing. I'm playing. Don't put all of this on your blog. I hope y'all edit that. What am I looking forward to? I am looking forward to 2026, honestly. Politically, I'm looking forward to 2026. We are organizing. We are, good. You can clap for that, because we should all be looking forward to it. There may be some people out here who's not, but we can clap louder than them. I'm really looking forward to what we can do to build on the campaign we started in 2024. I really do believe in, what we call flanking, meaning sexual and gender-based violence is often bastardized and pushed to the side, right? Like, I'm sorry that happened to you over there, but I'm trying to deal with gun violence. I'm trying to deal with the environment. And we also, part of our work is helping people to understand that there's not an issue that you care about that does not touch on sexual and gender-based violence, right? If you're thinking about people who are homeless, if you're thinking about food deserts, if you're thinking about maternal mortality, if you're thinking about gun violence, if you're thinking about prison reform, all of those things have an element of sexual and gender-based violence in them. So we should be working in tandem. We should be working together, right? Come on, we love the claps. When you look at the epidemic of mass shootings in this country, right, which we know is clearly worse than most other industrialized countries, or countries, period. There was a statistic that came out, and I may quote this wrong, so y'all probably should Google it, but it was something like 66%. I keep looking at Danny because she's really the brains of the operation. But it was something like 66% of all of the shooters in these mass shootings have a history of sexual and gender-based violence. I think I'm right about that number. So you can't tell us that those issues are not interwoven, right? So we need to stop trying to silo these issues. There's so much work that we can do together. Again, what can we do together that we can't do apart? It matters when we have politicians or leaders who come and want to operate from a moral authority, but have these things that they won't respond to and answer to that are around sexual and gender-based violence. We need to keep holding people's feet to the fire. Is that what you asked me about? What I'm excited about?
That's exactly what I asked
I'm excited about that.
Exactly what I asked you about. We have time for exactly one question. And if I don't pick you, it's not because I hate you. So raise your hands. Does anybody have?
Stunned into silence.
Everybody's stunned. Okay, you in the front. It's your time.
Hi there. I just want to build on what you were just talking about in terms of the work that there is to do, the work that you're doing for all of us and for all of the people that we know and love. What can we do? What action are you looking for us to take to support and engage with your work?
Come on, I can write a whole song about this. Listen, the thing that we really need everyday people to do, right? Movements are not just about the people with the microphone, the person with the bullhorn in the front. Movements are built from everyday people. And in the Me Too movement, one of the biggest things we fight are misconceptions. And so when you come to something like this and you hear the truth directly from the people, we need you to go back and be ambassadors. That's really important. It may seem like nothing, but it's a big thing. When you're at the, Thanksgiving or cookout and somebody says something that like, that's not what Me Too is actually about. It's actually not a witch hunt, right? We need you to help us clear up those misconceptions. That's really, really important because people keep trying to push this issue to the back and say, oh, the Me Too is dead. Nobody's thinking about that anymore. And yet we can name 60 or 70 things literally right now that are all connected to this issue. So that's important. The other thing is we need funding. Now, I'm not going to pass around a hat. I'm not above it, but I won't do it today. But even if it's not us, you can find your local, and this is really important, your local rape crisis centers who are about to all lose federal funding, right? We've heard this about a lot of people losing federal funding in the news, but what people don't hear, there's so many things that's hard to keep up. Every single rape crisis center in America is federally funded. That's over 1,300 rape crisis centers. Y'all need to hear that. Every one of them is federally funded. Every one of those victim assistance programs for women and people who have experienced domestic violence or sexual violence are federally funded. So if you have one in your community, this is a great time to write them a check, right? And the other thing is, follow us. We have lots of great information, lots of real information. You can come right to the source.
We can't follow you on X.
You can't follow me. Don't follow me at all because I'm a fool. You don't want to follow me on social media. You're not going to really get a lot of good information. Follow Me Too, though. Me Too, MVMT, everywhere. And we are on Twitter. I'm not going to call it that other thing. The social media formerly known as Twitter. And we're also on Instagram, and we're on Facebook, and I think we might even be on TikTok. Are we on TikTok? Look at me. Come on. I refuse to do TikTok, but let the kids have TikTok. So follow us and get real information. If you see something that feels like, does this make sense? Come and check and see if we've said something about it. But it really is important for you all to get educated yourselves. We're going to be bringing back another digital tool soon called Act 2. We had built the world's first digital social activism search engine, and we're rebuilding it now. And part of that is so you can find the podcasts and the books and the articles and things you need to read to get real information about this issue, because it really is everywhere. There's not a single person within the sound of my voice who has not been affected by sexual and gender-based violence. None of you. I promise you that. And so we should all care about it as much as we care about everything else.
I think that's a great place to end it. Tarana, thank you so much.
Thank you.